afternoon. If everybody can please take their seats as quickly as possible, we're starting in 1 minute. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Please take your seats. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to Uppsala and to this very important event on gender equality called Created Equal, which precedes our General Assembly. It's great to see all of you here with us today. Before starting this event, I would like to start expressing my congratulations to the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize winners, Nadia Murad and Denis Mukwege. This prize is a response to misogynist global leaders that normalize rape and sexual harassment in their own societies, and to those who use them as a weapon of war. I applaud Ms. Murad and Mr. Mukwege for their tireless work to promote gender justice. And as today is presidential elections in Brazil, and one of the candidates is a confessed misogynist, and we will say, ele não, not him. I started realizing that gender discrimination was a big problem when I was a young man growing up in Brazil. And I started realizing that because even when I was moving to my teenager, when I was becoming teenager, I was wondering why these issues are so complex. And then I started realizing that even in my family, women were not accorded equal rights and opportunities. And later in my engagement on gender issues, I realized also that I was contributing to gender stereotyping to this problem. And I started then to realize that I was doing that, contributing for this discrimination. So, for example, when together with other young people, I was making hastily jokes and also laughing on the discrimination and violence that women and girls were affected, and also gays. When I was a young professional and later on in my professional career in the humanitarian and development sector, it was clear to me that gender discrimination was an issue that needs to be addressed. And we cannot ignore the situation or stay silent in the wake of gender-based violence, persecution of sexual minorities, in the lack of opportunities for women, rape. We cannot accept, and there is a long list on that. My passion for gender justice continues to grow, and that's because I believe that we can revert this situation of inequalities. As I have my story, you may have your own reasons to believe and engage in gender justice. Today we will hear from people from different backgrounds, different constituencies, why they think that gender justice is an important issue for us to engage. And also, but we will also celebrate and showcase our gender justice work from across the Alliance. If you will do that, if you will have this critical examination of our own individual behavior in terms of gender issues, and also in the context that we are living, we may realize that it's, for an alliance like ours, it's very much important that we come together to promote gender justice at all levels. And also, as probably most of you heard, to position ACT Alliance as a leading faith-based organization on gender justice. For leading us throughout the program this week, we will have two masters of ceremony, and I would like to introduce you Zanelli Mukomba from South Africa and Camila Lopes from Brazil. Welcome, warmly welcome to our masters of ceremony today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sanibonani. Welcome to this special gender justice event. My name is Zanele.
And I'm Camila.
The theme of the 2018 ACT Assembly is Hope in Action, Putting People First. It reflects the proactive agenda of the ACT Alliance to bring hope through our work. ACT is determined to leave no one behind. We believe in the importance of engagement of religious leaders and actors to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 5. Therefore, we will begin the assembly with the gender justice event.
We will hear from different church leaders, youth, high-level UN representatives, and civil society leaders why they think it's imperative to work for gender justice. We will celebrate and showcase our gender justice work from across the Alliance, and we will see the amazing work in the Alliance and the diversity of our members. We will see that gender justice, it's not just a woman issue, but it's an issue for everyone to address. We'll see that gender justice, it's about so many different things, reaching from ending gender-based violence to economic empowerment, maternal health and representation, to mention some.
So that we're on the same page and we're setting the pace for this meeting, we'll define what gender justice is, according to ACT Alliance. ACT Alliance understands gender justice as the equal enjoyment of human rights, opportunities, responsibilities, resources, and rewards irrespective of gender or sexual identities, including fundamental freedoms in the political, civil, economic, social, and cultural fields of life. Gender justice ensures that all people have the power to shape societies, faith communities, and their own lives. If you want to be on social media, you're welcome to actually use the hashtag Act for Gender Justice and the official assembly hashtags ActGA 2018 and Hope in Action.
The first speaker is representing one of our hosts here in Sweden. The Most Reverend Dr. Aunt Jacqueline is the Archbishop of the Church of Sweden. Before she took up the position in 2014, she was a bishop of the Diocese of Lund. Dr. Jacqueline is also an adjunct professor of systematic theology, religion, and science at the Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago, USA, where she taught and was director of the Zygmunt Center for Religion and Science between 2001 and 2007, and she was a president of European Society for the Study of Science and Theology. Her international engagements include the Council of the Lutheran World Federation Council and member of the World Economic Forum, Global Future Council on Migration. She has authored several books and numerous articles published in various languages. Please, Archbishop Aunt Jacqueline, the floor is yours.
One done.
Thank you. Good afternoon. On behalf of the local hosts here in Sweden, I would like to say välkommen, welcome, hej. You know some Swedish already. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. I'm very much aware that for many of you it's awfully cold here. It's a little cold for us too, but it's supposed to get warmer as the days pass, and probably you have a part in that too. So I hope you will feel the warmth of a welcome here in Uppsala. And now we are gathered under the headline, Created Equal, a special event on gender justice. Created equal. That sounds simple and easy, both in theory and in theology. God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness." And so God created humankind in God's image. Male and female, God created them. Male and female, equally created in the image of God, the same value, the same dignity. Yet, we all know in praxis, it has never been that simple and easy. Not even within the community of Christian churches and congregations. And not even in the early church, even though we sometimes tend to think that they did better than we do. But probably it wasn't, because otherwise the Apostle Paul would not have had to remind Corinthians, Galatians, and all the others of that equality. In the baptismal liturgy in the Church of Sweden, we often read Galatians 3:26 to 28. And now you don't need to go to your Bible apps. I'll read it in just a second. And I'm sure that in many of your faith traditions, you also read these words at baptism. And let's hear them as a reminder of the gift and the power of baptism, as well as a reminder of the equal dignity given to all people in creation. So the Apostle Paul, "So in Christ Jesus you are all children of God through faith. For all of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." In spite of this, the world is not a place of justice when it comes to gender. We have full knowledge of the fact that women and girls are exposed to injustice, discrimination, violence, and oppression, simply because they are women and girls. This knowledge obliges, especially in the light of the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Some progress has been made, but lack of gender justice is still one of the bigger challenges facing the world. It creates suffering among individuals and represents a huge waste of resources. Globally, lack of equality is a direct cause of poverty, lack of education, and hunger. Or put the other way around, more positively, communities and societies that work on the basis of equality do better than those who don't. Gender justice is essential so that all people can shape their own lives as long as that is possible. Moreover, gender justice is critical and indispensable in empowering all people, women, men, and children, to build just and reconciled societies, as well as vibrant and trustworthy faith communities. So, gender justice is a win-win concept. Work for gender justice and gender equality is based on the conviction that every person is loved and has been created by God, and that all human beings have the same inalienable dignity and rights. This is a conviction shared across multiple faith traditions. And in the language of human rights, it is also largely shared by the secular world. As Christians, as a community of equals through baptism, as the church, we are called to pray and to work for just and inclusive communities and societies. So we need to resist exclusion and discrimination and practice inclusion instead. We are called to stand with people who are discriminated against and denied their rights. Christ died and rose again so that our God-given integrity and dignity be restored. Following him includes the call to eliminate the institutional, the cultural, and interpersonal systems of privilege and oppression that sustain discrimination day after day. So I hope that this special event on gender justice will be a step on the way in creating new energy and in assuring us that words need to become praxis. Let me close with a quote from this year's Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Dr. Denis Mukwege, regarding the equality of women. He said, "As long as our faith is defined by theory and not connected with practical realities, we shall not be able to fulfill the mission entrusted to us by Christ." And he continued, that was last year at the General Assembly of the Lutheran World Federation in Windhoek, Namibia. He continued, "If we are Christ's, we have no choice but to be alongside the weak, the wounded, the refugees, and women suffering from discrimination." So again, gender justice is a win-win concept. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Archbishop. We are looking forward to hearing more from you today.
The next speaker is a prominent guest from the UN, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. She is the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, where she was sworn into office in 2013. Dr. Mlambo-Ngcuka has worked in government and civil society and with the private sector, and was actively involved in the struggle to end apartheid in her home country of South Africa. From 2005 to 2008, she served as Deputy President of South Africa, overseeing programs to combat poverty and bring the advantages of a growing economy to the poor, with a particular focus on women. Prior to this, she served as the Minister of Minerals and Energy, Deputy Minister in the Department of Trade and Industry. She was a Member of Parliament as part of the South Africa's first democratic government. Dr. Mlambo-Ngcuka began her career as a teacher and gained international experience. I'm also enjoying the opportunity to introduce you. She gained international experience as a coordinator at the World YWCA in Geneva, where she established a global program for young women. Please do take the podium.
Thank you very much, Zanele. Save something from my obituary. It's wonderful to be here. Dear Rodelma, dear Archbishop, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, fellow believers, it's wonderful to have this time of reflection together. The theme is very instructive, and the Archbishop has set the scene for us. Indeed, hope in action is about people putting people first, especially those people who are in need, and connecting that to gender justice connects the theme. Because discrimination against women remains one of the biggest challenges of the 21st century. It is one right that is most violated in all parts of the world, and perpetrators of injustices against women are hardly ever brought to book. To the extent that the 19th century was an era where people, especially people who believed, united to fight against slavery, not because many of them were slaves, because they believed this was wrong. And it was possible to outlaw slavery, even though we have not won completely, because we still talk about modern day slavery today, but it's in the periphery, not in the mainstream of society. In the 20th century, the world fought colonialism and racism and won. And this was not fought only by the people who were colonized and those who suffer racism. Racism continues to exist in our midst, in our churches, in our communities, but it is not the mainstream. It is in the periphery. And we have mechanisms to deal with it when we see it. Gender injustice is in the mainstream of our society. It is not in the periphery. And that is what we need to turn around in order to make sure that the 21st century, and since we're only talking about 2018, not towards the end of the 20th century, please, in the first quarter of the 21st century, we have to turn this around. This is the mission of our generation. I believe. Yesterday, I told the wonderful young people I had an opportunity to dialogue with that Frantz Fanon has a wonderful quote which says that every generation has a mission to fulfill or betray. This mission of gender inequality is our mission, and I hope that we are going to fulfill and not betray it. We know that sharing of knowledge and experience amongst faith-based activists is a requirement for us in order to achieve the vision envisaged for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, because gender equality is a prerequisite for the successful implementation of that agenda. In 1995, at the Fourth World Conference in Beijing, that was a turning point. The world agreed on a broad agenda for gender equality. It gave us a roadmap. 25 years later, we have made progress, but also we're dealing with pushback and erosion of some of the gains that we have made. In the last 25 years, we have seen successes in women's education, women's health, more women in paid work, decrease in poverty, even though we've seen inequality increasing at the same time. We have also seen many laws that have been passed by different countries that entrench gender equality and protection of women against injustices. We have also seen institutions and structures that support gender equality, like women's ministries, commissions, etc., in many countries. But we have not been able to change the norms that underpin gender inequality. And churches in many of our societies are the custodians of those norms. So on one hand, the church has been part of propelling us forward, but also the church has also been part of keeping us in the wrong place. And now we are seeing a certain degree of regrouping of those who are putting us back, who are also dragging also some of us from the churches in pushing back and in stagnating society. The church is also a very important role player and an arbiter in the moment that we're in, because I truly believe that it has a unique opportunity to address polarization in society. The church, like those who stand for public office, does not have the luxury of taking sides in extreme in a manner that further polarizes. Wherever you stand on each side of the divide, our responsibility is to pull people together so that we can find a society that can move together with relative harmony and unity. To the extent that many of the polarizing issues of our time, the patriarchal structures, the cultural and social forces that are legitimizing discrimination against women, might find solace in the church, it becomes our responsibility to stand up and say, not in our name, and find a way that gives hope and ensures that gender justice is there for everyone. Recently, I was in the Lake Chad with a young woman, met a young woman who had been captured by Boko Haram. Before that, she was married off at 15. It turned out that the man she married was Boko Haram. The man donated her, took her to the Boko Haram camp, and then donated her as a suicide bomber. When she was sent on that mission with 2 other girls, the bomb, fortunately for us, for her, even though it did indeed kill the two girls, she did not die, she lost both legs. She was in hospital after that, where she was raped. When I met her, she was in the care of UNFPA, helping her to heal and to move forward. And she had started speaking and engaging with other girls in the hospital to teach them about how to tell the signs of someone that will drag you into the radicalized groups and how to learn to stand up for yourself. That is a story of a 20-year-old who has seen so much. Everything that has happened to that girl has happened because she's a girl. Her parents allowed her to be married off early because they thought that this was a way of addressing family poverty. Her husband could donate her because she was a woman. She could not stand up for herself and say, I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to die and kill other people. She was raped because she's a girl. She represents many different versions of this situation that is faced by many women and girls, which therefore makes it our responsibility to stand up for them. We are at a tipping point now. We can make a difference that heals both those who persecuted that girl and her, and create an ecosystem in our society that does not make it possible for these kinds of practices to thrive. We are at a time of a Me Too movement, which is a movement about women in solidarity with each other, where a woman is able to say, this happened to me too, and I believe you, and therefore give the other woman both solidarity and comfort and healing. It is also a movement that facilitates the address of impunity of powerful men who are used to abusing women and getting away with it because they can, and bringing them to book, hopefully in a manner that teaches, in particular, the next generation that the normalization of this behavior is unacceptable and there are consequences for it. It is also a movement that hopefully has opened our eyes about the prevalence of violence against women and the injustice that it carries, and therefore propels us to do more and to reflect about how we could change this trajectory and normalization. It is also a movement that provides an opportunity for all of us to enter the space by ensuring that in the institutions that we are responsible for, we have both policies and believed interventions that are changing the trajectory. We have the means to change history. I think we have the conviction to change history, but we have to demonstrate that we believe and that we take the suffering and these injustices seriously, and we are willing to act. We also have to show that we believe in a world that brings together everyone so that we can all be valued. Men, women, black, white, young, old, and people of all genders, all of whom are made in the image of God. It is important for us not to give ourselves a place where we judge who is not made in the image of God and therefore does not deserve our grace if we have any. Our place is to open our eyes and to embrace and to rise and fall with the challenges that we inevitably face in the times we live in. As one girl said, it is also a place where I want people to help me restore my faith in action. Not just faith, but faith in action. And she actually asked me, she was about 16 years old, I am so confused these days when I see the indifference sometimes in my community about the things that are happening to women. That I'm even wondering, do you think Eve ate the apple? Or maybe this too is a way in which women began to be put in a path where we can never win. When it reaches a point where young people ask those questions, I really think that our sense of responsibility has to be heightened so that we can be the one place of refuge where people are able to find themselves. And of course, speaking from the United Nations, which deals with these controversies as well, just as the church does, I think together we can be formidable in bringing about the changes that are required in society, because we are in a privileged place and we are expected to use this privilege in a very responsible way. Because if these two institutions are able to raise hope for society, to be the hope for women, to be the hope for girls, to be the ones that are driving justice, I think the 21st century may just not be what we need it to be, a century where we are able to turn around all of these injustices that have plagued our society, and as well as addressing the issue of polarization of society and being big enough not to be the ones who throw stones, even when stones are being thrown at us, but who help to put everyone together so that we can move together forward in a direction that is empowering to women and girls. Thank you so much and good luck.
We are at a tipping point. We are at a tipping point. It cannot happen in our name. Our mission is clear. Gender equality is what we're aiming for. Thank you very much.
We'll now have a conversation between the Archbishop and the Executive Director. To moderate this discussion, we are lucky to have with us Dr. Asa Karam. Dr. Asa Karam serves as Senior Advisor at the United Nations Population Fund. In that capacity, she is the chair of the UN Interagency Task Force on Religion and Development, and the coordinator of the UN's Global Interfaith Network on Development, Humanitarianism, and Peace and Security. She continues to lecture in several universities, including the United States Military Academy, West Point. She has previously served in senior capacity on issues of democratization, humanitarian rights, peace and security, and gender equality in intergovernmental entities, in NGOs such as Religions for Peace, and as a president of the Committee of Religious NGO at UN. We are looking forward to listen to you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and from my tradition, I wish you all peace. I wanted to take the opportunity, first of all, to thank the ACT Alliance for this wonderful invitation to be with you all, but particularly to uphold what I hope none of you take for granted, which is that your assembly is beginning with a discussion and an affirmation of gender justice, which in interreligious history is quite a feat. You heard Dr. Fumzile speak about the formidable transformation that can be possible. I think you will also appreciate that we are here with two formidable women, leaders in their own right and in their different fora, who are sitting on a red sofa. And if any of you have an issue with a red sofa, each of you are sitting on a red chair. So let's begin by appreciating this beautiful opportunity and the moment that we have. We wanted to try to have a conversation literally amongst these two very powerful women who have already spoken to the value of gender equality and gender justice. But I think we are, in a sense, anticipating that we all seem to understand what we mean by gender justice. And Archbishop, you said in your discussion, you mentioned how it's a win-win. Do you care to perhaps just elaborate a little more on how you see gender justice in general from your historical experience of working as a unique woman of faith leader in your own country, of your own church? What was gender justice? What is gender justice to you based on that leadership that you've already provided and have achieved?
Thank you. Yeah, of course, to me, the understanding of gender justice is based on the biblical notion and in theology. I mean, the Bible provides a basis for inclusiveness. As we read the Gospels, we see how Jesus interacts in ways with women that are open, inclusive, welcoming, and restoring, except for the text I have for the sermon this afternoon. But that's a different thing.
You're not reading from that one here, though, right? That's not the one. Okay.
I'm not going to give that sermon now. You have to wait for that. But I mean, there's enough to really give us a sound basis, also for theologies that promote gender justice. Now, then again, as we all know, that theologies and churches and other faith communities have been part of the problem as well as part of the solutions. And I do think that we need to acknowledge that. And churches need to be places both for memory and hope. I think one of the things we need to do is to remember the stories of the men and especially the women that have gone before us. Because us sitting here is also due to the work that other women have done before us. And I think churches have a responsibility to cultivate that memory as well and be very much oriented towards the now and the future. And to me, equal access and equal participation are good criteria to look around you and say, is there equal access? Is there equal participation? Okay, then we are in probably a good shape. And as a Lutheran theologian, I always need to say that we talk a lot about justification by grace through faith, and you can't speak of justification without speaking about justice. And you can't have justice full without gender justice. That's why I think it's a win-win thing. It's not that if women gain, others will lose. No, it's really win-win.
Thank you. Dr. Phumzile, you spoke about how religious actors are and churches are the custodians of the norms. What would you therefore say is a gender justice from a rights-based perspective? What would that entail?
To the extent that states, including also intergovernmental bodies like the United Nations, are guided by laws. The UN is guided by the UN Charter, which calls for the universality of rights. In the case of governments, we have constitutions that secure the rights of its people. In some countries, we have been able to entrench the rights of women. For faith-based organizations and institutions, it is more than the laws. Mm-hmm. It is the underlying practice. It is the underlying culture. It is a belief system. So I think there is almost like a more significant role for faith-based organizations because we've got to walk the talk. We have to be the living act of what we are professing. We also have to have this larger heart where we are able to be a place for everybody of any faith who needs us, and for every woman there has to be a way in which we are concerned about where they find their place. So this bigger generosity of spirit, I think, is what is called upon faith-based organization. And I also want to underline the fact that it is also about what we teach and what we invest from Sunday school to the elders. What we say in the pulpit and what we give to the people sitting in the pews. It's a way of life, and it must be reflected as such. People must be able to see that this is what we represent. There are times when the church has done that, has thrown itself on the side of the trampled, and has helped to raise the consciousness in society. But now we're in a particular point where there's so much pushback that a lot of goodness that has already been gained is under threat. So we may differ on certain and many things, even around issues to do with gender equality, but we cannot differ by making sure that we do not lose this fight and we move forward, because the risk of losing it has major repercussions for society.
And it would be valuable to also reflect a little bit on the extent to which the United Nations, as the multilateral system, sees that value and sees that requirement to work together with the faith communities. In 2014, the UN Population Fund, together with UNAIDS and UN Women, convened a group of religious actors, faith-based organizations, including members of the ACT Alliance, and they issued a call for action. And it was in the leading up to the post-2015, what we now know as the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. These various religious actors came together and made a call in which I'm only reading one part, which says, "Not in our name should any mother die while giving birth. Not in our name should any girl, boy, woman, or man be abused, violated, or killed. Not in our name should a girl be deprived of her education, be married, be harmed, or abused at a young age or any age. Not in our name should anyone be denied access to basic health care, nor should a child or an adolescent be denied knowledge of and care for her or his body. Not in our name should any person be denied their human rights. We hold these matters to be necessary and relevant for a true transformation of our societies and central to the sustainability of any development agenda." Now, given that joint commitment, Archbishop, what do you believe, therefore, are the obstacles? Why does gender justice remain areas of contention and challenge?
Well, traditions are strong, and sometimes they take an awful long time to change. And while working for change, also counter pushes are coming up on the scene. And it was already mentioned that we are seeing backlash these days, and not only affecting the position of women, but also justice and equality at large, including the LGBT community and so on. I think, to put the large picture out there, I think we are suffering, the world is suffering from drinking from a very poisonous cocktail, which has 5 ingredients, 5 dangerous P ingredients, and that is polarization, and that is populism, and that is protectionism, setting one's own interests first, and that is post-truth, and that is patriarchy. And this dangerous cocktail is, obviously, to many people, it tastes too good. They don't taste the poison. And it's really doing a lot of damage these days all around the world. And it is not easy to counteract, but we need to resist, because the dynamics that comes with this dangerous cocktail also uses religion and faith to be divisive. And we get a lot of these discourses that churches and communities who push forward on justice and anti-discrimination inclusiveness, they get, oh, you are not really faithful to your own tradition, you are just doing politics, or you are being used by those awful liberals or anything. So they're politicized from the outside. And that is quite hard to resist, but we need to resist. I don't think there's any other way forward.
Thank you. The 5 Ps that you mentioned, just to remind colleagues. It's a poisonous cocktail of populism, polarization, protectionism, post-truth, and patriarchy. I was going to ask you, Dr. Phumzile, to speak to the challenges of gender justice from within the multilateral UN system, where we have 5 other Ps, which are supposed to be the more productive and helpful Ps underlying the Sustainable Development Goals agenda, people, planet. What do you think challenges the gender justice and gender equality dynamics from within the multilateral system?
Well, the multilateral system is an intergovernmental space where you have everything that you see in society playing out. Because the United Nations is a coming together of the different nations who normally are coming representing whatever it is that we know about them in their own countries. There was a time when the United Nations was a place where whatever was facing society and was harmful to society, it was a place where nations got together to find a way to neutralize, to work together, to bring about what nations could do together. Since the Second World War, where peace has been a priority, there has been an effort to do that, to have the United Nations holding up the peace flag, that's P for peace. With the Sustainable Development Goals, we also have added the other Ps. 1 P is people, making sure that we leave no one behind, and making sure that whatever we do, we look at those people who are at the bottom of the pyramid. The other P that has come to the United Nations with the Sustainable Development Goals is the P for prosperity that is shared, so that we address the issue of inequality and poverty within and between nations. The other P is the P of the planet, ensuring that we address climate change and the compromising actions to the planet that we are all responsible for. And when you look at all of these Ps, peace, people, planet and prosperity, planet, it is universal, the challenge. When there is no peace in Syria, you will feel the pinch in Sweden, even if you are far from the conflict. Because the people running away and everything that comes with that will create change in our own society. If we don't look after the planet, wherever we are, we change the course of the planet for everybody. If we don't address shared prosperity and we exacerbate inequality, we create economic migrants and people who are taking a lot of pain. Some of them end up in radical movements that create havoc for whole nations. So the United Nations is struggling to pull all of those things together, and every nation that is part of the United Nations has a responsibility. And cutting across all of these is the women who always suffer most. And that is why I'm so thankful that humanitarian work is at the center of the work of people who are in this room. because the humanitarian crisis that we've seen, which is the biggest that we've ever seen since the Second World War, has a lot to do that in the United Nations, we are struggling to make the peace I'm talking about be stronger than the peace she's talking about. So help us manage the situation.
Well, so we have a basket of deplorables that has 5 P's in it, and a basket of desirables, which has 5 P's in it. Archbishop, what do you propose from where you are today, perhaps based on the experience you have already championed and the leadership you have already given? But what would you say are some of the potential means to address precisely the challenges that you enumerated from within the faith communities, but also beyond? What would you say would be something that you would like to call upon this group to be active in supporting or scaling up or creating or what have you?
One thing to say is, of course, that repentance is possible and change is possible. We always need to emphasize that. And then, as always, to see, analyze, assess, judge, and act.
Dr. Funzile, what would you call upon this gathering and your own community within the UN system to do to address the challenges you have just enumerated?
I think wherever we are, it's actually a privilege, either to be in the United Nations, to be in the leadership of the church, to be in fellowship. So we have to have the courage of our conviction to stand up, even sometimes to be a lonely voice within the parts of the collections and the fellowship that we are. But to actually just blend for the sake of blending and not stand up for the truth is a significant betrayal of what brings us to the faith. We have a responsibility to stand for women, not to accept that people must be persecuted because of their sexuality or isolated or judged. We have to stand up to make sure that we denounce and we act on violence against women, because this is what makes us who we are. We also have to consider that if not us, who? If not us, who? Whose responsibility it is to make the world better? And if not now, when?
Thank you very much. I think I have a minute or two to ask the most contentious question that was saved until the very, very end, just so that we could have a high note. One of the areas on which we find still a deep sense of fear, of concern in the gender justice agenda is an area which is not just men or women, but issues related to human sexuality are still the most contentious terrain in all religious traditions. And they remain a terrain that is very central to the gender equality and gender justice agenda. Perhaps, Archbishop, just in a couple of words, can you tell us how you've tried from within a theological perspective to, what are some of the arguments you've used to make it okay to talk about some of these very contentious debates and issues? Has it been possible?
Well, yes and no. Obviously, there are situations where it seems almost impossible to talk about this. But successful ways that I've found is to listen to the stories, not only individual stories, but also the journeys that you have made as faith communities. For instance, the Church of Sweden started back in the 1970s to work with questions of homosexuality, and that is before homosexuality was no longer a disease in Sweden. It was until 1979. So having had this conversation within the church has given us something that we can share with other communities who haven't had that conversation. And we can listen to their story. And the other thing is, I think, a sound sense of proportion. These are important questions, yes. We need to talk about them, but they should never be regarded as church dividing, because there is a thing called the Poverty and Justice Bible. Some of you may have seen that. It's a Bible where all the passages that are about poverty and justice are highlighted. And there's almost every single page you have that highlighted. Now imagine a sexuality Bible, and imagine how many portions actually would be highlighted that talk about sexuality. They are not so many. So to keep a sound sense of proportion, I think that's something crucial.
I think on that note, because this is the ACT General Assembly and this is about religious communities and leaders, so it makes sense that we end this particular portion with the words of a woman religious leader. And we've already been reminded very smartly by both women that gender justice is a win-win, and that if we work together, it's a powerful and very formidable dynamic that will be very hard to push against, especially if we can expand to include other faiths and traditions as well. And I'd like to be able for us to just remember that the journey of building a massive, it's a Chinese proverb, if one may say so, that the journey of building a big, huge mountain began with collecting small pebbles. I think you'll find that these are not small pebbles. We've already got some formidable mountains in this room. So let's continue to build upon it, and thank our speakers and all of you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. We will have a follow-up session later, maybe to have a discussion with them more. Now we're going to watch a video. The video we'll see is from Democratic Republic of Congo and from Panzi Hospital. You will see Dr. Mukwege, who together with Nadia Murad are the most recent Nobel Peace Prize winners. Dr. Mukwege is a gynecologist who operates women, girls, and babies who have been raped and had their bodies destroyed. He also runs a place called Docker's House, where girls who have been excluded from their communities after they were raped can live, get training and support. He is also an activist and advocate, and he speaks up against any violence and power abuse.
Sijuu kuna kwa tu sata inje ndeza kwa tunune ikala mshambre. Asa nikichakwa kani komie peki. Ninazoona ile picha inanikia mumeki. Nika kutana tu machozi nishanza nimangika mumeki. Nikaenda tafuta sombe, kufika mshamba ili makenze. Niko tu na chuma hivi, nikaona bapapa batatu wanachomokea. Niko mchafu kabisa. Batatu. Wakanipata shh. Nikashituka. Bakanipiga ngumi, kangoe kavunja lino. Nikapoteza raison. Sasa nilipoteza raison na ndio kangoa kanibaka. Bakanichezea kwa jinsi wanajisikia. Nilikuwa nasikia vile mtumbu moto, vidonda. Tulalamika alikuwa anatembea hivi. Singelifika hapa kama si. Bakanipima. Après 3 jours, bakona vitu aendeke damu kona pita sana. Yani pima, akakutana kwele bakuniacha magonjwa, lakini ile tu damu. Bakaniacha na bakaacha mimba na njoo huyu mtoto. Ana nafaka nikiangalia mtoto Huko saa moja hapo mabisirani tena kunaanza kuya. Nina kiaona nani atukane mtoto, nani ufea haiko ndio alituma vile vikuu. Mungu ndo anaona maisha yangu ya kesho. Na mimi naona kabisa maisha yangu ya kesho itakuwa mzuri. Juu kosa laana ishakuwa baraka.
Mukwenge's work has been supported by ACT members for the last 20 years. When Dr. Mukwege visited Oslo last year, he said, you have the freedom to speak up. You can write, you can ask why this is happening. You can challenge those in power. You can do something. You can do something.
Now, it's a pleasure to introduce the next speaker, the Reverend Dr. Olav Fixet Veit, General Secretary of the World Council of Churches. He was elected in August 2009 and was re-elected to a second term in July 2014. Before he took up the position as General Secretary of YCC, Veit was General Secretary of Church of Norway Council on Ecumenical and International Relations. Veit serves as a co-president of Religions for Peace and has extensive experience in interfaith dialogue. As General Secretary of the World Council of Churches, Veit was led the Fellowship of Church through such gatherings like the 10th Assembly of YCC in Republic of Korea. He was also being instrumental in leadership of international consultation on such topics as climate change, peacemaking, and refugee resettlement. In 2002, Veit was awarded a doctorate in theology for his dissertation on mutual accountability as ecumenical attitude. Please, Olav, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to greet you all on behalf of the World Council of Churches and its 350 member churches. And one of the leaders have already spoken to you. I'm honored to be here, but I'm also honored to be here as a man. We cannot go the miles together without doing it as women and men towards a community, a just community of women and men. This is not the first important gathering in Uppsala for the ecumenical movement. 50 years ago, the World Council of Churches had its 4th assembly in this city. And in one of the statements from the assembly, we find the sentence, I quote, "The church is bold of speaking of itself as a sign of the coming unity of mankind." They were 90% men, so they hadn't got used to more inclusive language. But the message is quite strong, that the church is bold of speaking of itself as a sign of the coming unity of humankind. And I think, and it is acknowledged, that the 1968 Assembly was a turning point in the ecumenical movement towards seeing the quest for unity of the churches as a way to work for the unity of humankind. They were not so far at that time to say that that means also justice between men and women. But the direction was given. 20 years after, the World Council of Churches launched a decade called Churches in Solidarity with Women. It changed many things in the churches. It changed, for example, that if you get a delegation from the Church of Sweden or Church of Norway to Geneva from the leadership, more than 90% will be women. But there are many other things, much worldwide important issues that was raised in this decade. that this is on our agenda today again, as it was, for example, also for the World Council of Churches in Jamaica a few weeks ago, where we had to say we have to recommit ourselves to this agenda of the decade in solidarity with women. We can ask why. Why have we not become more efficient? I would say more fair, more just as churches. The question is even more important to ask, how do we get there? The work is not over. We have to take step by step and commit ourselves and commit new generations again and again to say that this is the unity of humankind that we also have to show as unity of the church. The wisdom of those who have already spoken I will not repeat, but I will say the World Council of Churches is committed to work among churches, but also far beyond our circles and with partners like ACT Alliance, to say that this is the unity we seek. This is the unity we want as men and women. We don't want this way of discrimination, of unfairness, of injustice, of violence. We want something else. And therefore we also have one campaign that I think more and more men really understand the importance of. Thursdays in Black, towards a world without rape and gender-based violence. Wear black dressing and to wear badges saying that this is my commitment, this is our commitment, is actually an effective way to say this is what unites us and should unite us. And furthermore, we have to be practical, as it is said. But we also have to discuss, what do we believe? We believe in the one God that has created us equally in the image of God, as one humanity. And we have to say this is to be shown in one church, serving the one world. We have a lot to do, and we shall do it together for God's world. Thank you.
Thank you, Olaf. We'll remember to wear our black on Thursday. I'll ask the under 30s to stand in the audience. Everyone who's under 30, by age not at heart. They make 7% of our conference this year. Thank you very much. I'll also ask those who believe in gender equality to stand. Please turn to your neighbor and tell them, not in my name. Thank you. It's your turn now. You may be seated.
What a crowd. Now, we will continue celebrating and learning from ACT members' contribution toward gender justice. We will start in the Holy Land, move it to Argentina, and then cross the world and end up in Australia. First, we will hear from Mr. Bassem Tabet. He's the executive director and the manager of the Asset Management Unity at the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land. Previously, he worked for 11 years with the Mennonite Central Committee as the office manager. He also worked for 4 years with a national NGO called the Health Development Information and Policy Institute as a program manager. Bassem has 19 years of experience in the field of development, program management, peace building, gender, and lobbying and advocacy that he gained via his work with local and international organizations.
The second speaker is Ms. Laura Chacon Gonzalez. She is the coordinator of strategic communication in CREAS, which is the Ecumenical Regional Advisory and Service Center. She is a Cambodian, but living and working in Argentina. She has worked as a specialist of communications and public opinion of Caritas Colombiana, Organism of Episcopal Conference of Colombia. She is a member of the Gender Campaign Reference Group and the chair of Community of Practice in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Lastly, we'll hear from Mr. Shay Matner. He's head of operation from LWF, World Service. He's from Australia, but based in Geneva. Previously, he served as program manager and later executive director of Australian Lutheran World Service, a related organization to LWF. In 2015, he established a program called Prick and Pint, an initiative designed to get men talking about and acting on their health. Prior to entering an aid sector, Shay was a teacher in various countries for over a decade. His academic background is in anthropology. Bassem, please take the podium. Oh, you're ready.
Thank you. First, I'd like to greet you in Arabic, marhaba, which means God is love. And also, I'd like to convey the greetings of Bishop Sani Ibrahim Azar, the Bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land. And I'll be talking a little bit briefly about the experience of ELCJHL in modeling and experiencing the implementation of gender justice. The countries of the Middle East that came under Ottoman occupation have treated Christians and Christian churches as ethnic minorities, what they called mullah. This classification afforded Christian churches a degree of autonomy in regulating all family affairs of their members under the authority of the heads of the churches. Of course, this means that even in present time, each religious body has the absolute right to regulate the affairs of its spiritual subjects and to organize them for the practice of their religious rituals and observations, including marriage and family law. Each has a unique set of personal status laws and a court process through which such matters are governed. However, religious laws, personal status, and family law applied in Palestine and the Middle East are among the most challenging obstacles to the advancement of women and their equality with men. Family laws are discriminative in all matters related to marriage, divorce, and child custody. These laws provide sufficient legal power for men to control the fate of their wives at home and in the society. The LWF gender justice policy helped us as the Evangelical Lutheran Church to understand the theological arguments in a focused manner, to realize how the Bible and teachings of Jesus support gender equality. Of course, we examined that argument from a Palestinian perspective to help us consider the guidance within our own context, focusing on equality between both men and women. And between 2011 and 2013, our church went through a restructuring process. We believed that it was the ideal time also to explore creating a new family law. We wanted gender equality, and we wanted a family law based on gender justice. Of course, the process was not without challenges. The ELCJHL Synod, which is the legislative body of the church, had difficulties understanding why only the Lutheran Church needed to change a tradition to which so many people in the Middle East region are accustomed. The members were not convinced and tried to stop the discussions. Even some of them abruptly left the meeting during the discussions. 3 years later, ELCJHL adopted the Lutheran family law and created the ecclesiastical court, which henceforth provides for gender equality when dealing with family issues. This was a historic decision that came after a long process of deliberations that started in 2013 and resulted in appropriately given justice to both genders. In the Middle East, it is the only ecclesiastical court and family law that incorporates gender justice. The new ecclesiastical family law has focused on the following main issues related to gender justice. First, we have the marriage age. In order to ensure complete freedom of marriage and the elimination of child marriages, we have expressly stated the law to set the minimum age of marriage at 18 years old. The age of 18 is considered, according to the local law, to be the age of adulthood. The second point, a married couple's financial system. The joint and equal financial rights of the spouses after marriage are confirmed in the provisions of the Lutheran family law. The third is divorce and separation. If there is a defect in the relationship, one of the spouses has the right to resort to the court for termination of the marriage. There are real and valid reasons for ending a marriage. Examples of this include exposure of one of the spouses to violence or cruel treatment, abandonment, adultery, infectious diseases, and other reasons that can prevent the sustainability of the marital relationship between the spouses. Fourth, custody. The law provides for equal rights and duties between husbands and wives in both alimony and custody as it relates to children. The wife must be supported by her husband if she is unable to work and vice versa. Fifth, women's rights to inheritance. All the children intended to benefit from this inheritance shall receive an equal portion. Regardless of gender, they receive inheritance equally. Finally, despite all the challenges, we didn't give up, as we strongly believe in transforming our church for a better future. We based our work on theological understanding of all individuals created equal by God. And to this day, we continue to receive positive feedback from members and of our church and from other churches. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone. In 2017, members of ACT in Latin America and the Caribbean decided to form a community of practice for gender justice. We got to know the work of other ACT members in the region and connect their work with what we were doing, which has been very inspiring for us. At the time, the gender policies of the Alliance had just been updated, which was a great support and motivation for us. Latin America and the Caribbean is the region classified as the most unequal in the world, where gender inequality is one of the factors that most slows inclusive and sustainable development. In the region, we have the highest rates of femicides, low access and poor quality of sexual and reproductive health services, and the highest rates of maternal mortality and teenage pregnancy. Almost half of the female workforce is employed informally in the region, which implies job instability, low income, and lack of protection and rights. Although it is mainly women who work at the land in Latin America and the Caribbean, only 18% of them own the land that they work on. Therefore, it was inspiring to find a firm and commitment work organization with a long history in the region, who, through specific programs and projects, support initiatives for the food sovereignty of women and indigenous and African descent, initiative of social and solidarity economy of women and LGBTI community, and advocate the promotion of women's sexual and reproductive health, as well as developing advocacy actions against gender-based discrimination and violence. In this scenario, the continuity and sustainability of the efforts made by ACT members is strengthened mainly by the political, economic, and social instability experienced by the countries of the region, the growth of alliances between political parties and religious fundamentalists that put work with a focus of human rights at risk, by the absence of the policies that aim at reducing gender gaps in the Latin America and the Caribbean countries. In this context, sustaining the initiatives that church and FBOs are carrying out in the territory requires a theological perspective compatible with human rights, based on the deep conviction that our role as Christians is to accompany those who most suffer with love. We need a better understanding of the realities that affect women in the region in order to give an effective response in the building of more just relationships. Church and FBOs should not be an obstacle to the advancement of rights. Rather, we have an important educational, pastoral, and prophetic role to play. I am part of the Ecumenical Region Advisory and Service Center, CREAS, an ACT member in Latin America. In the work we do, we recognize the indispensability of the strengthening of women's capacities because it has a multiplying effect on the well-being of their personal, family, and community life. That is why we support economic empowerment of women and why we work for the territorial articulation of their initiatives, promoting alliances that contribute to the creation of conditions for the sustainability of these efforts that address coordinated and committed actions to achieve the transformation. Through the reflection and practice of CREAS and the Regional Gender COP, we know that in the order to leave no one behind, we must act together and urgently push back the inequality that affects women. Therefore, our call is to work in partnership to 1. Express and publicly support rights-based positions against debates about gender ideology and about electoral manipulations and policies that make us of religion sentiment. 2. Strengthen alliance and practices with churches and ecumenical and Christian organizations for the rights of women and LGBTI population. 3. Promote zero tolerance of violence against women, girls, and LGBTI community, denouncing and repudiating violence toward them. Promote the exercise of masculinities that counteract the practice and behaviors that generate violence and inequality, especially within our congregations and communities of faith. 5. Convene an interchurch dialogue to promote understanding and take a critical look at the factors that generate high rates of adolescent and child pregnancy and mortality. 6. Strengthen with our diaconia programs and projects the entrepreneurial capacities of women and their initiatives. And 7. Offer a special welcome and attention to the women of the migrant communities and their families, not only through timely humanitarian assistance, but also through spiritual support and psychosocial assistance. We call on all of society to join this urgent purpose for equality. We, as a member of ACT, are committed allies in this goal to achieve a full life for all.
Good afternoon. As you've just heard, I'm married to a smart professional woman called Libby. And together we have a daughter, Ruby, who is 5, and a son, Finn, who is 7. And they mean the world to me. Finn's still young enough to think that I know everything, second only to Google and God in that order. When we kick the football to each other, he'll pull his socks up immediately after he sees me pull my socks up. And when I push them down, he pushes them down too. It's a nice confidence boost, especially at the end of a long work day, but it's pretty scary too. What influence am I having already on him? By my actions, and without knowing it, I am shaping Finn into the sort of man I want him to be, mistakes and all. I'm defining for him my own definition of what masculinity is, and that includes how I treat women. The men whom boys grow up around can have a profound impact on the way they treat others. In 2001, a journalist interviewed two 4-year-old boys playing together in the street. One was Palestinian, the other Israeli. Asked why they were not fighting instead, they said that they were good friends and liked each other's jokes, just as 4-year-old boys would say. 13 years later, the journalist returned to interview them again. This time the interview did not happen because they didn't want to be in the same house together. Asked why, they said that their fathers and older brothers had taught them to dislike each other. It's only natural that it's been women who have put gender justice into the public debate because it is women who have been most affected. Their argument is so strong, as we have heard this afternoon, that it's often seen as women's business. But in my view, as a father and as a husband, it is just as much man's business. For me, it is not instilling in Finn a sense of treating his mum in the same way as anyone else because she is a woman, but treating her in the same way because she is a person, and simply because that is the right thing to do. After all, treating people in the same way is fundamentally what our faith asks us to do. Faith can be a mighty tool which can unlock behaviours. In Papua New Guinea, for example, where 2 out of every 3 women suffer from domestic violence, but where 96% of the population are Christian, we found that the most effective way of changing attitudes towards women was connecting gender justice to theology. But faith can also be a hindrance. Only 3 weeks ago, the General Synod of my Lutheran Church in Australia voted for the second time against the ordination of women, just 6% shy of a 2/3 majority. Arguments against were largely based on interpretations of the Bible, but how do I explain to my children that a church that they believe in so much still values men and women differently? What I learned through this is that I cannot assume that what I believe is important is necessarily important to others. Recently, some friends and I established an initiative after my dad passed on with prostate cancer. He died of it and not with it because he detected it too late. And we didn't want this to happen to us or our friends. The idea was simple. You get your blood tested and have a drink together afterwards while learning from a doctor about men's health. But we did 2 things wrong at the beginning. First, we assumed that most men thought their health was a priority because it was important to us. And second, we pitched it in a way which put them off completely. We told them to go to the doctor. I mean, this is Manthropology 101 and we failed. So we approached it differently. The first thing we did was not to assume good health was important to men. And second, we didn't ask them to go to the doctor, but invited them to a session called How to Be a Better Man. What would you do with an extra 10 years of your life? Today, there are almost 100 participants meeting once a month across 4 different locations in Australia, comparing their blood readings and listening to a doctor tell them about how to stay alive longer. Likewise, if we wonder why men aren't keen to participate in gender justice campaigns in our development programs, perhaps we need to ask why and reconsider our approach. Part of that is making the word gender more accepted by men as something that involves them too. And if we invite them to learn how to be a better man, and within that address the influence they are having on young men around them, like my son Finn, and the responsibility they have in treating all people, including women, with the dignity they deserve, then perhaps, just perhaps, we stand a chance. Thank you.
Y cuando pienso en género, pienso inmediatamente en las vidas concretas nuestras, de los hombres y de las mujeres. Y masculinidades es una dimensión importantísima de género.
Guatemala i Centralamerika är ett av världens mest våldsamma länder. Våldet drabbar särskilt kvinnor, barn och andra utsatta grupper. Här arbetar Svenska kyrkans internationella arbete tillsammans med partnern för att alla ska kunna leva i trygghet, värdighet och rättvisa. Att utbilda kvinnor och män i frågor som rör rättvisa mellan könen är en viktig del i arbetet.
Masculinidades significa las relaciones de poder que los hombres tenemos enseñados por la sociedad, que no siempre son muy saludables.
Genom att ifrågasätta stereotypa könsroller blir dess negativa påverkan på både kvinnor och män synliga. Våldet är en del av den machokultur som genomsyrar hela regionen Centralamerika. Kvinnor utnyttjas många gånger i männens maktspel. Våld som leder till allvarliga skador eller i värsta fall döden ökar.
Empezaba con lo del miedo al miedo, porque muchas veces es lo que nos paraliza, o sea, el tema del acoso en la calle, o sea, decir, bueno, tengo que afrontarlo, tengo que no permitirlo, pero no puedo decir, y si maltrato al tipo y tiene un arma, entonces, digamos, siempre el miedo a cierta situación.
Arbetet med att öka genusrättvisa och jämställdhet sker på flera plan. Tillsammans med partner driver vi bland annat ett påverkansarbete för att alla ska få rätt att äga sin egen mark. Vi ger också stöd till kvinnor att starta små kooperativ. Allt fler människor blir medvetna om sina rättigheter och viljan och möjligheten att utkräva dem växer.
Si todos los días matan mujeres, es porque todos los días hay que trabajar el tema. Si la matan a las 7 de la mañana, hay que empezar a trabajar a las 7 de la mañana. No es como una temática, ¿verdad? No es solo una temática, es abordar la injusticia de la sociedad. Una de las injusticias primarias de la sociedad, además de la de clase, de la racial, es la desigualdad de género. Trabajar toda desigualdad. Así que el género es una de las tantas desigualdades que hay que trabajar en la vida cotidiana. Yo tengo una opción política, he decidido dedicar mi vida a, pues no al género, ¿verdad? Pero sí dedicar mi vida a que esta sociedad sea más justa, sea un mundo más habitable, una mejor sociedad.
Thank you to the speakers. We can be quite proud of being an alliance where so much great work are going on. It was also great to see the video from Guatemala and get a great understanding about masculinity.
As you can see, there's a lot of gender work that's already happening within the ACT Alliance. Now we're building onto what's happening on the ground, and we want to see how we can work jointly in an effort to enhance gender justice activities on the ground. From that idea, the idea of a gender campaign was born to introduce the ongoing process, creating a gender campaign. We have with us Palwashai and Collins, who can join us on stage.
Ms. Palvashai Arbab is the head of communications with Community World Service Asia, based in Pakistan. She's a humanitarian and development practitioner She's co-chairing the ACT Alliance Communications, Media and Brand Advisory Group, and is a member of Gender Campaign Reference Group. In addition to her communication focus, she has been working on gender justice internally within the organization. Currently, she works on program development, fundraising, communication, media, and public relations with Community World Service Asia.
Mr. Collins Kudakwashe Shava is a youth representative from ACT Alliance Forum in Zimbabwe. He is part of the Zimbabwe Council of Churches Youth Leaders Forum. He has interest in mobilizing young people to contribute towards the Sustainable Development Agenda. He also has interest in the interconnectedness between religion and sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon and assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Palvishe and I'm part of the reference group on the Gender Justice Campaign with the ACT Alliance. Collins and I will run through the process of the campaign so far and what it intends to do. We're living in a world where gender inequality still exists and undermines the human dignity of all. In some countries more prevalent than others, and there is substantial evidence of that. And coming from Pakistan myself, which is ranked 143rd amongst 144 countries on the Gender Parity Index, and which has reported a 21.5% increase in violence against women just last year, and a 34% increase in gender gap. I can't imagine a more relevant time for campaigns like these. As the world's largest network of Protestant and Orthodox churches and agencies engaged in humanitarian development and advocacy work, the ACT Alliance is in a very privileged position to make an important and crucial impact. We know that religious leaders and faith-based actors can and have for decades and centuries played a central role both in people's lives in every corner of the world, as well as norm setters, legislators, and moral compasses and advocates on the global scene. By bridging faith and human rights, we can make transformative change and mobilize communities and right holders.
The issues of human dignity and gender justice are not new to the Alliance. In fact, members have been working on this since long before the Alliance was established. The idea of developing a campaign therefore builds on the work that has been done by many theologians, activists, churches, and faith-based organizations who are bravely speaking out in defense of human rights and the protection of human dignity for all. The Created Equal campaign, which we are calling it so far, therefore aims to build on, scale up the work done by members, in addition to creating something new that we can gather around.
So initially, the ambitious idea was to launch a campaign today. Yes, here. We were just going to take it head on and launch it right here. But we soon realized that wasn't possible if we really were to have an inclusive and rooted process where all members could take part in developing the campaign. We see this assembly as a crucial starting point or next step for enhanced action on gender justice together as an alliance. We should draw from the rich diversity that we have as an alliance, and we should use our experiences and the different perspectives that we bring to make this an effective campaign. And I would again reiterate that dialogue is very, very important to ensure that this campaign can be contextualized and localized as much as possible. We need to identify areas where we want to move forward together, be it gender-based violence, rape as a weapon in war, FGM, which is female genital mutilation, the unequal representation of women and men in institutions all over the world, the added burden women feel when they're hit by climate change, the problems with not having ID card, which is a necessity for getting education or legalizing personal laws, for migrating, for accessing healthcare, etc., etc. The list could go on and on and on.
In this process, we also discovered that we might have areas where we are having diverging views. For this, it is very important for us to create safe spaces for dialogue where we can share views, listen, and challenge each other. While doing this, we'll move forward together on the areas that we want to join forces together. The content of the campaign will be contextual so that the different realities that we face in different regions and countries can be addressed.
But now let us take a step back and share what has happened up until now. The past year has shown that there's a tremendous engagement on gender justice, and we don't want to duplicate something that's already there. In the feedback about new strategy, many members voiced this concern. Last year, the governing board approved an updated gender justice policy, and all ACT members are called to draw upon this in the drafting of their own if they haven't already. Earlier this year, a concept paper was drafted. This broadly sets out why ACT has dedicated increased attention to gender justice across all areas of our work in the form of a campaign. All the advisory groups and communities of practice were consulted in this process as gender justice concerns all of us. A reference group was established with gender, theological, and campaigning expertise, geographical representation, gender balance, and youth representation. The group is giving guidance on the process.
In this campaign, we will draw upon the lessons that were learned from previous campaigns that have worked on as an alliance, both what worked well and what we need to improve. By campaign, we mean an enhanced focus on gender justice as an alliance in the coming strategic period. The campaign will be divided in different segments. We will identify concrete goals that we want to achieve, one after the other. We need to raise the issue of gender justice with ourselves, our own organizations, the societies that we live and work in. We also need to address local, national, regional, and global decision makers. All this in order for us to see what you call real transformation. There are many existing gender initiatives, both ecumenical, interfaith, and others. Just like the Thursdays in Black, 16 Days of Activism, the Side-by-Side Faith Movement for Gender Justice, the increased focus on gender justice within the Alliance does not aim to replace any of these initiatives, but rather to collaborate within and strengthen these initiatives so that we can ramp up the work and act for gender justice.
The gender campaign stand in the exhibition area, which is on the floor below this one, will be a place to give your input here at the assembly. It will be a creative space with ballot boxes and lots of post-it notes. We will welcome you to the stand to learn more about the process that has led up till now and discuss questions you may have. We hope all of you will voice your concerns and influence the journey moving forward. We really want your input and your great ideas. And again, we want to say that we really don't want this to be another social media hashtag frenzy. We want your opinions because we want to see real change on the ground. After this assembly, we will continue to have these discussions in all forums, ideally. Material will be developed and consultations will be held. While we do this, we will continue the work we have already been doing for years. This includes work done in regard to Resolution 1325, the Maputo Protocol, and arenas such as the Commission on the Status of Women and the Commission on Population and Development, which will be increasingly important as we're moving towards Beijing +25.
As a young person, I feel the involvement of young people is key, not just as voices of generations of the future, but as valuable voices that can inform and bring insights for us today. As a young person again, it is clear that gender inequality has been a hindrance for development. As young people, we are generally not satisfied with a lot of things, hierarchy and patriarchy. We are committed in contributing towards a safe and equal space to all. We can use our energy and passion to challenge the status quo, taking gender issues beyond only ensuring equal inclusion of women in all spaces, but to see equal and safe interactions between people. Gender justice is a mission that we cannot betray. We need to use that to see that gender justice is not an exclusive women's issue alone. It is about relationships. Therefore, the involvement of men is crucial and important. Harmful masculinities negatively impact men and their life choices as well. Men often play prominent roles in the societies they come from, both as decision makers and as role models. We need to be able to create a common movement towards gender justice for all.
We firmly believe that ACT as a Christian-based network is in a key position to be a change agent. We need to show that religious narratives can be and already are part of the solution. Together, we can act for change. Thank you.
She only have a hole for menstruation and only for urination. I mean, they cut the whole thing and then they sew it. So this is Ethiopia, in the Horn of Africa. Since we are working with all faith-based organizations, we can see that we cover the whole country. Girls are circumcised in Ethiopia varies from place to place. We have a number of testimonies where they have difficulties of pain during menstruation. And during labor, there is high probability to develop a fistula, meaning that she cannot control her urine. She could be exposed to a situation where you will be handicapped. When a mother gives birth, they go for a blessing, and then they ask whether it's a boy or a girl. And then if it's a girl, they tell that make sure that you don't circumcise. And if a father confessor says it, it says it. It's respected. And there are many girls who have been spared from the practice. How do we really take this as an advantage, religious leaders as influential figures? We kind of presented the facts. This is the health consequence, this is the psychological consequence, this is how prevalent it is. And then most of them, they were not aware of this. They came up with a theological reflection, and then they finally endorsed a declaration saying that in our text we haven't found anything that supports this practice, and submitted to the government. This is our commitment to end the practice as a national response. I believe that if we really continue with this momentum, and if there is strong support from the international community, especially supporting the local civil society organizations, including the faith-based organizations, I think change is evident.
Thank you to the presenters. If you're left with some burning question or great ideas, please go to the stand in the exhibition area. Now we'll have a conversation, including some additional members. Dr. Azakaram will do the moderating again. She will still have with her the Archbishop and the Executive Director. In addition, they will be joined by Dr. Sushant Agar from CASA, and the ACT moderator, Ms. Silwin Shin Alba from National Council of Churches in the Philippines, and Father Evangelus Tiani from African Orthodox Church of Kenya. They will be duly presented during the conversation. Please give them a big hand.
So, welcome once again to a broader panel where we have some exciting and very valuable new voices joining us today. The context of this particular conversation is to try to develop an understanding and awareness together of gender justice through examples of practical work to address the role of youth, and specifically also to highlight the value of collaboration and cooperation, including between the ACT Alliance and United Nations Entity for Women. So welcome once again to our distinguished panel. I will not introduce already the two, remember we called them the formidable women, who have already been introduced to all of you, but I do want to take an opportunity to introduce our new colleagues on this panel. Ms. Silwin Sheen Alba is a networking and advocacy officer in the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. She's a youth leader from the United Methodist Church and the official delegate of the National Council of Churches from the Philippines to ACT Assembly. She's part of the ecumenical movement among Christian youth in her country, and she currently works as the networking and advocacy officer. She has humanitarian work experience, which started during Typhoon Haiyan, when she acted as the coordinating staff of the ACT Coordination Center. And I do believe it's her birthday tomorrow. Today. Happy birthday. Dr. Sushant Agarwal is the director of CASA, the Church's Auxiliary for Social Action in India. He is presently serving as moderator for the ACT Alliance, of which he was elected in 2014. He has previously served as a moderator, chairman of the ACT Alliance, the ACT International, as well as co-moderator of the Joint Executive Committee of ACT International and ACT Development during the formation of the ACT Alliance. His academic background is in social science with a specialization in rural development. We also are very pleased to have with us Father Evangelos Tiani, Director of Theological Advancement, Interfaith and Ecumenical Relations in the African Orthodox Church of Kenya. He's the national chair of the Side by Side Faith Movement for Gender Justice Kenya chapter. He is a member of the Executive Committee for the National Council of Churches of Kenya and also a member of the ACT Alliance Gender Campaign Reference Group. Father Evangelos teaches theology at the Orthodox Patriarchal Ecclesiastical School, Archbishop Macarius III of Cyprus Seminary in Nairobi, Kenya, and the Bishop Gatuna Theological Institute in Kiambu, Central Kenya. We have a very distinguished panel among us. I do believe, Father Evangelos, that it is your birthday tomorrow as well. Today. Happy birthday. So on the note of birthdays and the value of having such an incredible panel with us today, perhaps I could direct the first question with full respect for the youth experience that we have with us. Selwyn, if you'll allow me. What do you feel and know to be the role of youth in making progress to achieve gender justice? What's the particular value of the youth contribution based on your own experience?
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, let me thank ACT Alliance for inviting me to be here in this stage. So let me speak in behalf of young Filipino women and also as a survivor of sexual harassment myself. Gender injustice for young people, I think it's for this generation. I think the crucial role that the young people can do is to educate ourselves about this. What does gender injustice mean in different contexts? Because it may differ from each country to other countries and other countries, so that when we have this education, we can also analyze things and make or participate in solutions that are appropriate to those contexts. So there's both responsibility and also trust from you guys to let the young people participate in gender justice movements. So we have the responsibility, you also have responsibility to educate us. And I think that will be the call of the Youth COP, which you have seen earlier at this assembly. So, yeah.
Thank you. Perhaps it would be good to go from that perspective of the value of the youth engagement to Father Evangelos. You sit astride so many learning spaces in your own church and community. How do you understand the value of gender justice? What does it actually mean to you based on your own leadership and on your own learning?
Personally, I think the harmonious realization of the freely God-given qualities that God has given to all humans, either male or female, whether it is the dignity, whether it is the power, the resources that are available, and sharing them equitably, is what I would give as a definition for gender justice. Of course, it's from a theological perspective, but the reality is, if this is not fulfilled as God had expected from the beginning, then injustices will always surface, whether it's in a group or a family or a society in general. If these freely God-given qualities of humans, male or female, are tampered with, then definitely injustice will come.
Can I, since you have the microphone, and given your leadership, just ask you one more question around this issue? To what extent do you feel that the concept of masculinity is something that your own leadership in your community and your institutions are equipped to handle in this dimension of gender justice? How comfortable is your community talking specifically to masculinities?
I think that's a very good question to me as an African, as an Orthodox also, because my church is one of those churches that don't talk about gender justice really seriously. And at the same time, actually many people wonder what's an Orthodox doing in a gender justice forum. I mean, they don't give women a lot of priorities in ordination and such issues. But the reality is masculinities are a big part of the injustices that are caused either in African societies where I come from my context, and also from my church perspective, because the patriarchalness of where the church has grown from, has been formed from, up to this moment. Just to give a snapshot of an example, yes. Last year, our synod, of course, which is all men, hierarchs, because we don't ordain women, so it's our bishops who are in the synod, decided to bring back the ordination of deaconesses in our church. So they passed that last year, and they said, you know, we used to do this until the 16th century, when the Orthodox stopped ordaining women per se in this position of deaconesses. But we did it for 1600 years. So they said, let's do it again, because Africans seem to appreciate this. And they looked at the theology, the history, and they said, yes, let's do it. So the patriarch, who is the head of the church in Africa, went to 4 dioceses in Africa to start this. But in the first liturgy, where he was supposed to ordain 4 women, the night before and the morning of the ordination, it was full of drama because the bishops would not agree. This one says no, this one says, you know, the other bishops in the whole world will have problems with me. By the end of the day, he just laid hands on them and just made them like readers and singers and chanters. But he said they are deaconesses, you know, because of these challenges. So I can say masculinities are a big issue. And for example, in my context, this is one of the main issues to discuss, because the socialization that we have received for all this long need to be brought down. But first of all, be brought openly. The reason that I am involved in gender justice is because we have to start somewhere. And that somewhere is in such forums, in a discussion, openly, heart to heart. And then from there, then we can see where we are wrong and where we are not doing as God would expect us to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a brilliant answer and example. Mr. Sushant, you spoke earlier when we were together about the value of ACT Alliance working on this particular gender justice campaign and initiative. Tell us a little bit more from your perspective on why this is significant given your own experience and your own regional context as well, please.
Well, I think we heard that one of the Sustainable Development Goal number 5, is exclusively for gender justice. And right from the day we started talking about SDGs, I started thinking why it has to be made exclusive. And that was a message, big message to the world, that if you want to have a sustainable world, then you need to have the gender justice, gender equality. And that is a parameter which cannot be compromised with. Now, as far as this whole campaign about equality, if I see in my own context, I think it is the question of power equation, which starts from the family, then it goes to the community, and then it goes to the institutions, including our own churches. And that is a big question: who acquires power? Who controls resources? And who makes decisions? And those two major decisions, it's not what will be cooked in home on a particular day, but it is much more, even if we see in the family decision. Now, take example of a very unfortunate thing which is happening today in India, when in a temple, the entry of women were not allowed. Now, Supreme Court of the nation has allowed the entry of all women in the age group 10 to 50, right? But very unfortunately, while having lunch together, I had mentioned about this growing right wing all over the world. And I think one of the elements which I see is again power equation in this setup as to who controls. Now, in spite of order from the Supreme Court, the groups belonging to this right-wing group, they feel that religious faithfulness, as they proclaim to have, does not allow them to allow the women to enter in temple. Now, this is a matter to reflect. I mean, you have taken law into your order, not allowing this gender justice or gender equality to happen. And I think this is becoming true all around the world. And we being the faith-based organization, we being the part of the global church, I think we will have to take this initiative. And it has to start within the home. And this win-win situation can only be achieved if we start very aggressively, not very slowly. I will say aggressively, it has to start in our own family of global church. And we being a faith-based organization and alliance, ACT Alliance, when we have decided to have a campaign, I will say that is the aggressiveness. A message is being sent. When we had 2 young people speaking to us, right? We are saying that, okay, we are going to be intensifying the entire, it has to start from home, and it has to really spread out. And I will say not spread out within our own community of faith-based organization. We have partnership with others who may not be faith-based organization, and we should use this as an opportunity where we are making commitment, where we are going for action, but then go beyond the boundary of the faith-based. Because you need to have critical mass growing if you need to have louder and louder voices against this inequality.
Thank you very much for pointing out the power dynamic and the value of the partnerships. And you also pointed out, by the way, the fact that the rule of law on its own is insufficient. It's necessary, but is insufficient. Hence, the value added, as many of us have been arguing for many years, the value added of ensuring that you can be much more inclusive in the strategic alliances and partnerships that are formed in civil society in order to make sure that the rule of law can be respected. It cannot just be on its own a motivator and a preemptor, if you will. Given the particular political dynamic that you've also pointed out, which is where we have a number of more, shall we say, exclusivist political ideologies that seem to be coming increasingly into the political spaces, a lot more narratives which are more exclusive of others. Given that this is the reality we live in contemporary times, Archbishop Antje, you spoke in the previous session to the value of working together. How do you see the potential for the collaboration between the ACT Alliance members and the multilateral system, in this case, the United Nations? How do you see that potential being relevant or helpful to gender justice, given this current geopolitical climate we're living in at the moment? And you only have about a minute.
Well, I think it helps us to connect the dots of the different localities, the global perspective, and the regional. And I think a strength within faith-based communities is that we can listen to each other's stories and we can carry these stories across the globe to decision makers everywhere. I think that's important. We do need changes of laws, but we also do need changes of minds and changes of practices. And I think telling these stories and communicating them is a good method to achieve all of these three things.
Well done. Thank you very much for highlighting the value of listening, which seems to be taken for granted in times when talking and talking stridently seems to be the only dynamic, the pervasive dynamic. To go from there to an institution in the UN system that has done a lot of listening before it was established and continues to do a tremendous amount of listening and mobilization, perhaps Dr. Phumzile, you can tell us something about what you see as the executive director of UN Women. How do you see the partnership and the collaboration with ACT Alliance serving SDG Goal 5 on gender equality?
Thanks. Well, if I could just say something first about common sense, which is not common, but really common sense that is also about honesty. To actually believe that there's any church, as far as I know, in the world, where women do not bring integrity that goes with how you practice your faith, and therefore they do not qualify to be in the leadership of the church, is the ultimate dishonesty. And therefore they cannot be ordained because they do not have what it takes. I mean, you don't have to put the women through a test to actually know how much committed they are and how much they contribute. So all the excuses that have been given not to ordain women, really, it's all about, I think, as a Reverend was saying, the people within the church that are just refusing to see the image of God in the women. Secondly, same thing if you think about the United Nations. There's only about 20 heads of states in the world that are women, out of about 198 countries. Really? There's only 20 good women in the world, and the rest are cool guys? Because otherwise the world would have changed dramatically, you know? So again, that is the dishonesty of common sense, even amongst the voters, including women. So, Mike, your question. The UN needs to depend on the people because the charter says we the people, not we the member states. And we the people is the constituencies that you have. It is the young people in our communities, because in the next years to come leading to the 2030 agenda, it is going to be the young people that are going to be in the forefront. This is their life. For us, an alliance with ACT Alliance is, amongst many other things, important because of the partnership we want with young people. The partnership that also you need in ACT Alliance with young people, because this is their lives that we are deciding, and they are the leaders of today. the quality of the contribution that young people can make is very important for us older people because there is so much we don't know, especially about what's going to happen in the future, which they already know. Somehow, I don't know how they know it. But there's a lot that we know because of our lived experience, because there's no substitute for time. Can you imagine strong, structured, intergenerational partnership? How dynamic that is, how much solid the changes that could be. That therefore has to be built in structures. It has to be made formal, not voluntary. Otherwise, we will not change the world the way we want to. We will not change the United Nations the way we want to if this structured relationship between us and civil society and partners like ACTS do not exist. Thank you.
Brilliant. Ms. Selwyn, I think you've been called upon in this brilliant presentation to say something to, and let me structure the question because I know you can handle it. Let me structure the question slightly provocatively, not aggressively, but provocatively. Can you say what you would like to see happen in a partnership between ACT Alliance members and the United Nations system? What would you like to see happen, or what would you like to see not happen in such a partnership for the sake of gender justice based on your own work experience? Give us one piece of advocacy for what we could do or what we should not do in an alliance.
Well, first, the partnership between ACT and UN Women is still at the global level, right? So what I would want to see to happen is that it trickles down to the national levels so that it will really have an impact to the women in the world. We have, I think, 60 national forums. So if it's a vision that the UN Women and ACT Alliance will work on gender justice in these 60 countries, I think that's a lot. Mm-hmm. No?
Really?
But I also don't want to see that between this partnership, young people are not given priority in dealing with gender justice. Because, I attended the UN Women meeting earlier, and I saw that there's a global trend happening, that there's a rise in populism, there's a culture that's being set which is more likely unequal for genders. And there's also a positive way which ACT and UN Women is trying to pursue, which is gender equality and gender justice. So we are at the middle, where we have these two options. And if we do not, we are not taken seriously in, we are not offered the meaningful participation in gender justice, then we might go the other way. And I think this assembly has a lot to say when it comes to the assembly involving or engaging more meaningful the youth in its work, not just in gender justice alone, but in all other aspects of ACT's work.
Brilliant, thank you. Very often, we've sort of think in the UN context, the broader UN context, that we have discovered youth a few years ago, because now we're into working with them quite a big deal. For a long time, it was about youth as a problem, because we have to employ them and educate them, and it's a bit of a problem. Now it's about youth as an empowering force. So I'm happy to see that we've moved at least mentally from that particular space, but. You've called upon, Selwyn, very beautifully for the need to ensure that there's a localization of this partnership, that it doesn't remain only at the advocacy or global level. And you've also called upon the value of ensuring that youth are central and the engagement of youth. It's not just talking about them, but to engage with them. And you've also made an interesting point that it is very valuable to see that its gender justice is not a silo. It's not something that we do separate from everything else, but in fact is integrated into everything else. Thank you for those three very valuable wisdoms about the partnership. Father Abranios, I'm going to come to you and say, you see an emerging partnership between the United Nations system with UN Women in the lead and the ACT Alliance. What is one thing you'd like to see happen from that partnership and one thing you would like us to avoid?
One, I think I would love to see more men involved in the process. Not because I'm a man, of course it is because, but that's not the reason. The reason is because I think the campaign on gender justice have to involve men more deliberately. Not because men will push to be part of the conversation, but because they will be needed in that conversation. Because if justice is not just for women, it's for both men, women, boys, and girls. And I would like to see men on that table. And at the same time, and I want to reiterate this, because most of the conferences and big meetings that you attend, you only see senior people who are elderly people. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it's not. I will be old one day, but I would like to see the deliberate, building up of the younger generation. Mentor them, not for the sake of mentoring them, or because the law says that you have to have this percentage of youthful people in this group, but because you want them to occupy the space you are in tomorrow. And the youth are not leaders of tomorrow. Actually, they are the present, first of all. And then that present will transform into tomorrow. For example, I understand Africa by 2050, if I'm not wrong, will be the most youthful continent.
Yes.
But if you go to all our senior positions in government, in the church, wherever you go, even maybe among thieves, I don't know, it's not youthful people. It's not youthful people. And I would like to see the UN deliberately and ACT Alliance deliberately forcing youthful people to be part of this. And I'm very happy that this conversation right here shows what is needed today and for the future. Because if we have to transform people, the youth are the best people to transform. For example, today, what I can say today, if a youthful person takes it right now, it will go to 100 people who 50 of them, they have never met face to face. Maybe 50 of them they met. But if it is given to me, maybe it will be to 20 people who already know me. Thank you. And that's what I would think would be a very useful contribution.
Thank you very much for affirming the role and the value and the importance of youth engagement. I think that this is something that we can take absolutely for granted. Some of our colleagues believe that you have to do youth and then you have to do gender. And it's a bit ironic because, I mean, it's supposed to be both. But we keep learning as we go and do this development and humanitarian work. Every day we learn some amazing things that should be, as Dr. Phumzile was saying, they should be really rather common sense. But it's amazing how common sense can be an act of genius sometimes. So thank you very much, Father Branios, for saying that. I just wanted to, realizing that we are actually almost out of time, thank you, Ingrid, for that heads up. I think you've heard the value of engaging with youth in the context of gender justice. You've also heard the call that gender justice is a win-win for everybody and for every issue, because it is fundamental to and foundational to every other justice that we can see and talk about and live in our reality, whether it is the justice to this planet that we live in, or whether it is justice to one another, or whether indeed it is a justice to all other living creatures around us. If we can accept that gender justice is foundational, then we can also realize that the issue isn't so much that we disagree about gender justice. It is simply a matter of how we work together to realize that particular reality. You've heard from all of the speakers that listening, as Archbishop Antia reminds us repeatedly, listening is a key skill and indeed a requirement, if not a necessity, for this process. But we've also heard quite significantly that whether it is from east or west or north or south, the decision to collaborate is in and of itself a very important, foundational moment. And I want to be able to end with saying, again, a special note of thanks to all of you, and particularly to the ACT Alliance members and its leadership, for the bravery, the courage that it takes to go where no man has gone before. And to try to understand that we're not building rocket science, but we're being inclusive in the name of the very faith to which we would expect adherence. I would also like to close with a challenge to each and all of us. It is absolutely historic that you all come together and that you champion a campaign for gender justice. I would ask you to please consider that it isn't just the Christian communities which can build this world, but there are many other faith communities, and there are many communities that are secular in their inspiration and nature. And it is only by collaborating across all that we will genuinely be able to effect the transformation that we speak to and that we need in order to be able to live another century, or for our youth today to be able to lead into another century. So please consider expanding the partnerships and the collaboration. You've heard a lot about the youth, and there is no question about that. I just, as a demographer, or coming from an organization that works in demography, I've also learned in the last few weeks that we're talking about an increasing population of elderly around the world. And that is a population equally worthy of our respect. And it is something that will be the responsibility of the young of today to look after as well. So let us appreciate that gender justice is foundational, and that it takes courage to effect, and it takes an even greater amount of courage and faithfulness to reach out to other communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the panel. I guess today we've learned a lot. We've been inspired. We've been provoked. We've been challenged. And we've been touched. Give a round of applause to them as well.
Now, Sara Kambambari from ACT Secretariat will give some practical information before Hudema will round off. Welcome to the stage.
Good afternoon. Just a few pieces of practical information for you. So at the end of this gender event, coffee will be available on floor 3 and floor 6. We do ask all of you to move quickly out of the room, as we'll be starting the press conference very shortly. Please leave your interpretation headset in the room on your chairs. This evening, the opening worship starts at 6 o'clock at the cathedral. We ask you to be seated at least 15 minutes before. And if you want some help with walking to the cathedral, volunteers will be at your hotel reception in the lobby to walk you to the cathedral at 5:20. After the worship at the cathedral, you're invited to a welcome reception at Norlands Nation. We'll walk together there from the cathedral with volunteers guiding us. And then we'll be meeting again tomorrow morning here in this hall, 8:30 for worship. Upon entering the building, please leave your jackets and coats at the cloakroom in the basement. And do remember to wear your badges at all times. The doors will be open from 7:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Well, that was a great event, a celebration of wonderful people who care about gender and justice. We are proud of the wonderful speakers who have challenged us today, but also inspired us today, sharing their experiences and hinting at the way forward for humanity. It's wonderful to see so many gifted people here with us. We heard today, in this afternoon, about the statistics of the different challenges women, men, boys, and girls, and sexual minorities face around the world. We also have heard about the specific role of faith-based organizations play in gender justice, how stereotypes and social norms have to change, especially on discrimination or violence against women and girls. We have heard about the Beijing Platform for Actions and the need to tell stories of hope, stories that represent the world that we all dream of. As ACT Alliance, we can be proud of our history of systematic engagement on gender justice. However, we should not be content with which we have achieved so far. The world is a long way from gender equality, and there are movements working to backtrack on the gains we have made. More than ever, we need to reinforce our engagement in matters related to genders. That's to say, every matter. As a faith-based network, we have the double responsibility for greater engagement on gender, as sometimes our own structures and legacy are supporting patriarchal, social, and cultural norms that undermine human dignity at large. That gives us both the opportunity but also the responsibility to take a more prominent role to promote gender justice. We have to live out our faith and base our work on our Christian values, recognizing that every person is created in the image and likeness of God. We hope that the stories that we have heard here today can be used to help the implementation of the ACT gender policy across the Alliance. Through you, we want to be able to both accelerate and to scale up the work that you do in order to ensure gender justice around the world. This assembly is bringing our members and partners directly into corporations to promote gender equality and advance the implementations of the Sustainable Development Goals. As members, you are in a unique position to mobilize communities and to the public to challenge the stereotypes and build a movement for gender equality together with other like-minded organizations and stakeholders. And then we will be able to make a difference. This also requires intergenerational partnership, and you heard here this afternoon several times the role of young people. With those here today representing a wide range of ages and backgrounds, most of us here, we are very young in our minds, but some of you are young in your age. It's important that you bring a new, fresh youth perspective for our work on gender. Today is a chance for all of us to learn, to share, to achieve, and to celebrate our commitment to gender justice. Let's make sure that you use this moment to launch the ACT Gender campaign across the Alliance and beyond it, as was suggested. Let's work to bring together all our work, resources, and efforts on gender to ensure this campaign and our existing and future work positions ACT Alliance as a leading faith-based organization on gender justice. Thank you very much. Let's act for gender justice and let's change the world. Have a good evening.